There's an actual permanent solution for your suffering. And I'm not talking about some quick temporary fix. I'm talking about understanding something so fundamental about the nature of reality itself that once you see it, you can never unsee it. But you need to give me some time and trust. Because if you're tired of being stuck in fear, tired of existence dragging you down, trapped in an endless loop of trying to escape yourself, then this video might be the most important thing you'll see this year. I can't stretch how important it is that you take some time and truly listen, as these concepts can be quite deep and somewhat disturbing for the sense of self. And I know very few people who have a genuine depth of understanding in this field. I've dealt with immense amounts of existential suffering myself, and came through at the other side of it. There's a deep wisdom at the nature of reality, and you want to see, understand, and align with this wisdom. The more you'll do, the more peaceful you'll be. The more you deny, resist, and neglect what I'm about to say here, the more your life will be filled with suffering. This is not about some esoteric magic. This is simply how reality works. So in this video, I will tell you how the patterns of your brain cause suffering, how your ego gets stuck in self-feeding loops, and how freeing yourself from suffering is the path towards total understanding of reality itself. So let's start with some essential definitions. When I say suffering, what I mean isn't pain. Pain is a part of life that is as natural as any other sensation, really. It is not possible to stub your toe and not feel some pain. Your body will always signal pain to you, to protect you. Pain is there to tell you that something is wrong and that your body needs attending to. So when I say freedom of suffering, I don't say freedom of pain. There's a very important distinction that many don't see for their entire life. And hey, maybe you also haven't noticed yet. Maybe you too believe that suffering and pain are the same. But they are crucially different. Pain is an intense stimuli that doesn't need to feel bad. That's why sadism and masochism exist, because pain can even be quite pleasurable actually. The feeling of something being bad comes from resisting the sensation. If your body feels sore because you worked out the other day, then this ache that you might feel in your body can be quite enjoyable. It's just like it resonates as a positive memory of a job well done. That's because suffering isn't pain. Suffering is pain times resistance. It's not that you just get hurt. It's that you are hurting and thinking to yourself, I really want this to stop. The more you want anything to stop, the more suffering you will experience. The burden that we have as human beings is that we are really good at making the suffering worse. We can multiply it in our heads. That's part of what makes us so intelligent. The more you think about how bad something is, the worse it gets. The more you let go of wanting to control the experience, the more equanimous and pleasant the experience is going to feel like. That's why it doesn't really matter if you are a billionaire living in a $10 million mansion or if you're a beggar on the street. If you don't like yourself, you'll be miserable. Psychological suffering will follow you everywhere if you don't understand yourself. So the self is really key here. When I ask you who you are, there's an endless amount of things you could say. You can tell me your name, your career, what you believe in. You can tell me you are a human, or you can say you are a soul in a body. There's really no end to the amount of labels you can come up with to describe yourself. Yet, there is still no scientific consensus on what it means to be oneself. No real theory of consciousness. And no understanding of the mechanics of the ego, suffering, and death. Don't make the mistake to believe that we can't know these things. You can. It's just that we humans, like as a collective, are still living in the dark ages of consciousness. Our society as a whole has not yet understood the nature of being itself. And this partly is a product of our Western scientific society. Just that many older, more mystical traditions like Taoism, Buddhism, and Advaita Vedanta touch this truth very directly. Also, Western psychologists like Carl Jung was a huge contribution to our psychological understanding in relationship to the self. But all of it relates to the same fundamental truths that you can discover for yourself as an individual, independent of what the society's opinion or belief about something is. And we can see this kind of as like some psychedelic renaissance happening currently. The problem is just that the vast majority of people in society get lost in ideas and belief systems. We tend to identify with ideas and make them part of our identity. Beliefs are like programs in our head, and they get programmed in subconsciously. Beliefs are actually much more closer to viruses than programs, because they destroy your life in secret. For example, whenever I started to practice writing, I always had this judgmental feeling that what I was writing was boring, that everything I write is fundamentally boring and no one will ever care. Because I didn't care about it while writing it. But then this wasn't really a thought. It was a feeling that reverberated in how I was writing. I felt like I had nothing to say, nothing to give to the world, despite feeling like I wanted to have to give something. And I couldn't even clearly say that this is what I was feeling or believing, because it didn't feel neither like a belief nor like a feeling. It just felt like reality. That the reality is that I just don't have anything worthy to say. And these are the limiting beliefs that your entire mind is made out of. They are the reason why your life is the way it is. And when you think that you can't know truth, that it is something that can't be known, and that modern scientific framing of reality is just all there is, well, then of course, yeah, you get stuck there. And you don't see how much is possible in like 50, 100, 500 years from now. Or what is possible right here, right now, to discover. Because beliefs are not knowing. They reach into the deepest corners of your mind and form who you are. They inform what you think, do, and feel. And then what you think, do, and feel becomes your actual personality. If you live in autopilot, like you don't really are conscious about what you're doing in your life, well, you don't notice that any of this is going on. You don't notice what is shaping you. You will think that this is just who you are, and that's it. That's why changing is so hard. Changing how you behave, how you think, or how you act is a deconstructive process. You actually need to deconstruct what you have been before. As long as you don't understand where your beliefs are coming from, then you will think that you are your beliefs. You will think that you are stuck with them, and that the entire system that is running this is the same as who you are. Then of course you feel stuck being yourself. Which as a consequence creates the same thoughts, actions, and feelings. It's a feedback loop that feeds into itself. And that's why life can feel like you're stuck. Because you're actually feeding the thing that's keeping you stuck. Which is your ego. It's like reality is now this little box you've constructed. And you can't even conceive that it could be different. This often feels very uncomfortable because now your consciousness wants to move beyond this. It wants to find a more harmonized, better version of yourself. But your ego doesn't want that because it wants to remain the same. It's a structure that's there to reinforce itself, and to manipulate you so that it stays the same. That's why it denies, lies, and just wants to be overall ignorant of new information. To not see that it's just a structure is to not be able to move beyond it, because now it's everything there is. The entire personality structure is what the ego is. A pattern of programmed behavior that thinks it exists as separate, that it's in control when it actually just wants to change. Ego is suffering because ego is the resistance to sensation. That's why in most spiritual practice and just overall, people have this intuition that you want to destroy the ego or dissolve the ego. And if you don't, well then being yourself becomes tense. You are on edge, you are anxious or depressed. It becomes harder to change and harder to break the pattern as the pattern is starting to solidify and reinforce itself. But at the end, all what you think you are, all this entire personality pattern, all this structure, it's just a product of your environment. And you can see that because you've changed so much since your birth. Because what you actually are, like the awareness inside of you, transcends all of this. It transcends it completely. What remains the same is the fact of awareness. This knowing that in some sense, you are the same person that you were when you were born. But awareness doesn't want to be stuck in any programming. Its nature is to change and move. And be satisfied with whatever is there. That's what we see clearly when we see harmony in beauty and fun in games and relationships, connection and love. That's why you actually just simply want to be yourself. It's that this entire program that's running in the background prevents you from being who you are. It makes you cling to regrets of the past. It makes you worry about things that could go wrong in the future. It makes you compare yourself to others and see why you are unsatisfied with who you are. Because the moment you're unsatisfied, now it can assert control again. So it never has to be truly present. It never needs to look at its own structure. And you can see that by almost everyone being very unsatisfied with their lives, wanting to self-improve and feeling behind, creating this self-improvement identity to just somehow escape who you are. Very few beings like where they are. So the thing is that not wanting to be where you are already is the problem. Because wherever you are is you. You can't be somewhere you are not. It's literally impossible. It's like being in denial about reality. I read a comment from an old woman the other day, and it really stuck with me. She said, "In my 62 years of life, I've had a career, bought a house, been married, made 2 children, traveled the entire world, and then got divorced. And now I'm living all alone." And then she said, "Looking back at my life, I realized that nothing really mattered how I thought it did." And this brings me to the question, how much does anything really matter? We spin stories around our lives. Our entire life, we are like almost stuck in our own narrative about what it means to be you. And of course, it's a natural movement to want security and safety. And it's difficult to really be present and happy when it feels like everything is breaking apart or your survival isn't secured. But looking at life honestly, being conscious about what it means to live an entire life, it kind of becomes obvious that there's nothing one can hold on to. If you want to stay where you are and always remain the same, well then time will eat you alive. If you try to hold on to anything, well, there's no way it won't end in suffering. Because change is your nature. Whatever you gain will be lost. And the only way you can truly be happy and satisfied without fear is if you see this ground nature of reality. It's this nature of impermanence, change. And really the only thing you can do to live a happy life is to appreciate what appears in front of you and see the beauty in it. The only way to escape yourself is to see that you're not defined by anything. Existence happens to you by yourself. And nowhere you'll ever go will make you able to go away from yourself. It is absolutely an impossibility. You're defined by what you are and what you wish you were. And if you see that whatever is can't be wished away, acceptance is really the only answer. To see what reality is like is to surrender control to what is actually the case instead of what you want to be the case. The thing that wants to control already is the construct. It's a construct made out of past experiences that are long gone, that somehow you think are still real. The ego thinks it is keeping you alive, but it's just keeping itself alive. The way out of suffering is the dissolution of all your programming, all belief structures and ideas, all attachments to one thing over another. When you eliminate all filters you put in front of your experience that tries to identify with it in some overarching narrative, pure experience will reveal itself to you as pretty nice, as a free expression of what reality wants to be in that moment. It's faith in that whatever is must be, and that you're always playing the precise role that you must. The reason this works is not because you need to have faith in some god, but because this is how the mechanics of consciousness work. It's just what is true. If you want to take a scientific angle, you can model consciousness as like a multidimensional shape that is constantly morphing. Like imagine a complex 3D model where each point represents a different aspect of your experience. You can imagine one region lighting up when you taste something sweet, and another vibrates when you feel anxious, and another shifts when you hear music into the sound waves of music. This shape is your entire field of experience. It's not just your thoughts or sensations, but the whole theater of consciousness that makes up your reality at any moment. Now, the ego is like a pattern that has formed within this shape over time. Like imagine a whirlpool, like in a river. It's not separate from the flow of the river, but it's like a self-sustaining pattern that tries to maintain its own form. Whenever there's suffering, you can be certain there's ego, because it means a part of you is constricting against the natural flow of the river. Sometimes it's very obvious, like when you get dumped by somebody. Well, then your identity gets ripped apart because you have to question how worthy you are and how you relate to your love life and other beings, and it can be quite hurtful. So a part of your self-image, your pattern breaks. But it can also be very subtle, like the impulse to grab your phone to distract yourself, because there might just be a tiny sensation in your awareness that you're resisting, and you don't want to acknowledge that, so you immediately go and distract yourself. The ego is very, very subtle and very obvious at the same time. The mistake that the ego makes is to think that it's the entire field of awareness itself. It's like it thinks it's the entire river instead of the whirlpool, instead of just being like a part of the river as the whirlpool. It believes it's the center of attention instead of a programmed part. So whenever the ego gets threatened, be it because somebody's calling you out on your bullshit, or because you are experiencing a spiritual awakening, you start to see that the entire construct is fake. And this can feel like dying. It's an immense amount of fear to overcome. Because you then see that there was never a whirlpool separate from the river. The whirlpool was always part of the river, and the river was always whole and complete. Autonomous and free-flowing, without the need or possibility to control any of it. So what it actually does is it resists the pattern of the entire consciousness field. When you have a sense of identity, that's why it's suffering. That's why you want to dissolve the ego as much as you can. By seeing how the ego is programmed, you can actually let it dissolve. You remove yourself from the thoughts, from beliefs, and just from this automatic reactivity, and you start to calm down, slow down, and look from a position of awareness by simply seeing what is happening and not identifying with it. This is how you stop resisting. You can even stop resisting resistance itself. It's quite funny because it gets quite meta and it doesn't really make sense to speak it out loud. But when you are aware of it, it becomes quite shocking how meta it is. You can exactly observe how you identify, when you identify, and then even disidentify with this process because you're looking at the process. It's always the fact of looking at what is happening that dissolves the entire construct because you can see beyond it now. It means to look at everything without judgment. To see anything that happens in your experience as just one other sensation that comes and goes. Do this often enough and you dissolve your sense of self. Dissolve your sense of self and you'll stop resisting what is. Stop all resistance and experience no suffering. It's very insane that this is actually possible. And if I wasn't in the position that I am, I wouldn't believe it. As this is not something you can really believe, as it's a process you go through. But because the filter of personality is gone, awareness is all that's left. There's no center, so you actually see reality for how it is. Each moment of life radiating with truth. All you need to dissolve your suffering are radical self-honesty and emotional allowance. I've done this throughout my life, this entire process. It was quite brutal, but I'm very glad that I did. Even though I didn't know what I was doing, I also didn't really have all of the spiritual jargon I have now. But I do want to be careful, because I don't want to claim some supernatural powers. On the extreme ends, I still can suffer. I feel that at the intense edges of physical pain, there's still some suffering that can come up for me, that I can identify, even if it feels kind of subtle. The pain is obvious. The pain is very obvious. But most, if not all, my psychological suffering is gone. And my sense of reality has become very much merged with the present moment, and it's very continuous. I always like to say that I am a soup of sensations without a center. That's what it feels like to be me. So I am probably capable of suffering, but I have to look for it. I need to actively look out for it, as my standard form of being now feels very peaceful and equanimous. Whenever I feel bad about something, I simply look at it. I acknowledge all my feelings for what they are and then never try to be something that I'm not. But I don't feel bad about feeling bad. I don't judge judgments. There's like an overlay of acceptance towards everything. It's really hard to describe. Everything gets seen from like the overall field of awareness itself and not from the personality structure anymore. It's like pain is pain and pleasure is pleasure. Whatever this I was is gone. It doesn't form part of the equation anymore. Another way of saying that is that I'm everything now. As in every little sensation that is caused by my body is me. And there's no part of me that is more me and less me. It's just all the same. So the bottom line is that you want to allow to feel whatever you need to feel. Do not distract yourself from it. Be honest about your true thoughts, feelings, and intentions. Your ego will try to hide from you. It will try to hide from what you really think and what you really want. And to see that is to uproot its programming. All you need is to really look at how experience looks like, to just observe it, to try to feel it out so that you move through the emotional process and then to understand how it works. I also give free one-on-one coaching on my Discord group to guide people. You can check this out in the link in the description and take care of yourself, as I'm sure as if you do, you will go through all types of suffering with a certain lightness. And if you want to understand the universe as a giant machine that is there to simulate all types of love, well then watch this video next.